Hello and welcome to the Global View on this Thursday. I'm Andrew Gagan. Good to have you with us again here at Ausbiz. All right, well, global equity markets ended mostly lower overnight as investors were monitoring geopolitical developments after the US said it seized a Russian-flagged Venezuela-linked tanker. Now, on Wall Street, investor sentiment somewhat tempered by underwhelming jobs data. But we saw the Nasdaq actually finish high, boosted by AI-related stocks, while a dip in banking stocks weighed on the Dow. Now, among the tech stocks, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, they climbed as investors jumped back into AI stocks following recent concerns that they are overvalued. Nvidia also made gains. That's despite reports that the Chinese government has asked some tech companies to temporarily halt plans to buy Nvidia's H200 AI chips. Memory and storage tech companies gave up some of their recent gains. And shares of streaming giant Netflix rose as Warner Brothers Discovery Board unanimously rejected Paramount Skydance's revised $108 billion bid for the company. JPMorgan Chase fell after a broker downgrade. And precious metal stocks fell heavily as the price of gold and silver pulled back. And later in the session, shares of major US defence contractors fell. That's after President Trump said he wouldn't allow defence companies to issue dividends or buy back their own stock until they invest more in production and research. Well, the United States has seized two Venezuela-linked oil tankers in the Atlantic Ocean, one of which was sailing under a Russian flag, prompting condemnation from Russia. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says he plans to meet with Danish officials next week as the Trump administration makes clear its intention to take over Greenland, with the White House saying it's discussing options for acquiring the island administered by Denmark, including the potential use of US military. Now, on the data front, US job openings fell more than expected in November after rising marginally. In October, a separate ADP report showing that private payrolls increased by 41,000 jobs in December, which was less than expected. US Treasury yields have fallen in choppy trade as traders consider the latest labour data ahead of the highly anticipated jobs report for December, which lands on Friday. The yield on the 2-year was at 3.47%, the 10-year down around 4 basis points to 4.13%. US dollar little change. The Aussie is trading at 67.2 US cents. Oil prices have fallen as President Trump's plan to refine and sell Venezuelan crude raised concerns about the long-term impact of US actions. Brent falling to around $60 a barrel. Gold prices have fallen close to 1% as investors book profits. Spot gold trading at around $4,460 an ounce. Copper fell sharply from a record high the previous session, while nickel also tumbled from a 19-month peak as an early year rally in industrial metals lost momentum. And Bitcoin is lower. It's trading at 91,000 US dollars. Well, let's get across those market moves. Ira Epstein joining us again from Linn Associates. Ira, Happy New Year to you. Great to have you back here at Ausbiz.
Same to you.
So, let's start then perhaps with we'll get to geopolitics in just a moment. That data we saw, jobs, because it is a big week for jobs. What are you seeing there at the moment?
It's a big number we're going to get on Friday because we missed a month of the data. They'll do moving averages. So they'll take this report, the report before it, and the one that came in before that. They'll average them out, and they'll try to say this is where the market is or this is where the market isn't. As we've seen, the JOLTS report lost 600,000 offered jobs in the U.S. That's important. So suddenly, those that could hire have decided to cut the amount that they're hiring. And I was surprised all day today that the market wasn't paying attention to that. And finally, late in the day, as you said, the fact that the U.S. has intercepted that tanker that has painted itself and now says it's Russian, that has set off the market in different ways, and that spooked some traders a little bit. And the fact that it spooked markets a little bit, I think you just wait on all this at this point in time. So in a nutshell, I view the Venezuelan situation as still very bearish for the energy market. In other words, more oil. And the U.S. taking control for the time being of Venezuelan oil, the money that it generates, giving it back to the Venezuelan people. The president spooking the world is now he's going after Cuba. He says that they will fail now without that oil. He's going after Colombia for the drugs. He threatened Mexico. And I think he's at the point that if Russia wants to make a big deal off this taker, they're going to find that Trump's in no mood at this point in time. I think that he was made to look foolish by Putin. He was in the American papers, I can tell you that, not getting anything done and just dragged along. So I think you don't want to misjudge that. But money coming to work, it's only the first full week of the new trade year, and people that just jump in at the beginning generally get burned. I have now, 60 years almost of experience of being a registered broker, just shy of that. I've seen this, and I tell my clients and so on, I said, I know that you're paying me for my research. However, the best thing I could tell you to do is stand back for a little bit, let things simmer down and get to normal trade. Nobody can make money in gold when it's moving $80 a day or when the silver's moving $4 an ounce at a time, platinum $100 a day. If you think you're going to get that right, you're not.
And what can the same be said for those AI-related stocks too, because that trade seems to be gathering momentum early in the year as well.
Yeah. Well, at the beginning of the year, it's very difficult to say what's going to work and what isn't going to work. It's almost like people writing in December, here's my projection for the year. I used to do those. I gave up on it because in this world that we live in, trying to be right the next 30 days is about as far out as I think you should go at a time if you're going to be a trader in the market. Being an investor is very different than being a trader. As an investor, you're looking at PE ratios and so on, and you're looking at the AI game. I want to go on record with you right now, so we look back at it. The AI game is just beginning. Not every firm in it will make money, but this is now the equivalent of when we first got the internet. I was around for that. When we first got mobile phones that you held in your hand, first the flip phone, then the breakthrough with the Apple phone. This is that equivalent. And it is not friendly for jobs. People are going to discover in the first stages, companies let people go. They'll say, we got so much more out of what we're doing with this. Do we really need to have that person? That's the first natural thing to do. Later on, jobs come back as you're able to expand your business from this. You're not at that part of the cycle, in my opinion. So when I hear the U.S. government says it'll create jobs, yeah, but when? And if you're looking at what's going on right now, AI is really, in my opinion, one of these elements that hurts jobs, and it's going to change how the kids get educated in colleges because the idea that you had to be in computer science and so on, I'm not sure that that's the key anymore. So we'll see how this all comes about. AI can write software. That's the issue.
Ira, let's turn back to the policies of the Trump administration to begin the new year. As it turns out, the president turning into a very interventionist president in terms of foreign policy, not just on the international front, but also domestically too. Interesting to see what's going on. I mentioned there earlier about threatening to ban dividends and buybacks by defence companies unless they sort of make further investments. What do you make of that move?
Well, first of all, when you hear what he says and writes on his social media network, if your jaw doesn't drop, there's something wrong with you. I can tell you in America, I don't speak for all Americans, obviously, but I speak for people that I talk to and people that are bright in this business. We're all taken back sometimes with what he says. He fires off the hip. They have to rein him back in. Saturday, if you'll remember, just this past Saturday, the U.S. was going to step in and run Venezuela. Everything in our Constitution says that is not the case. Every single thing. Now he's telling banks they can't pay dividends. He's telling the armed force companies now, that the Lockheeds and the Northrops, that before they're going to pay out big dividends, they've got to invest more in research. Is that really what the president's job is? I'm critical of that. I like some of his policies, but this is not a dictator. All right. America's still the land of the free, and he will be reined in. You can trust that. So you've got to learn to deal with him. I learned the first 4 years. He says one thing. Don't believe any dates he gives you. They rarely come true. His policies are typically good. He means well. However, he gets carried away with himself from my point of view. Do I think he's a good president? I think he's pretty good president because his policies are working for the country. But I think that you have to take what he says with a grain of salt. Example, weren't we supposed to have a Fed chair announced before Christmas? Example, copper market is running because they're fearful that the President Trump is going to put a tariff on copper come June. Does he rarely hit the dates that he says? No. It's sort of like Elon Musk. He was going to have some ship go to Mars right now in this year at the end of the year. Now it's 2029. So you've got to understand what happens with these type of plays, with these men that have these grandiose ideas, and our president does, and he's only got until midterms before he may be reined in. And I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I am just saying that's the reality. And he's already calling on the Democrats and saying in the U.S. papers, if you don't get behind me, the goal of the Democrats will be to impeach me when they have the power, and that could be after the midterms. Just reality of what's going on.
Now, Ira, of course, you mentioned the Fed there. Of course, markets are soon going to turn their attention to that, given Jerome Powell's days are numbered. Given Donald Trump wants to essentially stack the Fed with his appointees, what is the prospect then in terms of the number of rate cuts you're likely to get there in the States?
Well, if you listen to Stephen Moran, the Fed governor that he is temporarily in place here, he says a minimum of 4. You hear, though, if you read the dot plot, you saw that the majority were 1.5 cuts. I happen to be that there'll be more cuts than that. I think that whoever gets the job will be the Trump appointee to make cuts, and I think they'll accommodate the president. Not for 1 minute do I think these men that are running say, we'd like to talk to the president, but we'll be independent. Until this man's out of office, there's always going to be that control to a degree on it. So I think that if you're planning for this year, I think you plan that, no, you're not going to get cut in January, in my opinion. They want to see more data. But once we know who the next Fed chair is, and I don't know that they're going to announce it anytime as soon as you keep hearing, we'll find out where this all goes. But I do expect more cuts. I'm more in the neighborhood of 2, maybe 3, if labor does what the Fed keeps saying and weakens. If it weakens, they will get aggressive.
Ira, always great to catch up with your view. Thanks for joining us from Linn Associates.
Thanks for having me.
Let's turn to the local market then, ahead of the open here, and perhaps reflecting what we saw on global markets overnight, which were down modestly. So SPY futures off close to 0.1%. And just in terms of data today, we're going to get some trade numbers for November. We'll also keep an eye on the what's going on there, particularly with that play for BlueScope. BlueScope having rejected that offer from SGH and Steel Dynamics. We'll get right across it all in just a couple of minutes' time.